Guys, welcome back to a new episode of the Boundary Riders podcast, episode 93, and this will be the final episode of the year. But that doesn't mean it's going to be the worst. Save the best till last, I like to think. And we've got a lot to talk about today. We've got some AFL news to cover, of course, but we will be taking a look at the most under pressure coaches going into 2025, well, our opinions of that. And probably the big one as well is the most memorable and best games of 2024. I'm going to go through, we're going to talk about it, and we're going to cover up a bunch more. So let's roll the intro and get straight into it. And then Rankin from the pocket, don't tell me, Isaac Rankin!
Yeah.
He's just got the license for a brothel.
Well, I think Gather Round's going to be more than just AFL this next season.
It's at the handle at the back, Nick Dankos to get the pies home! He's done it! So guys, my brother is with me as always for the last episode of the year. Great year it's been for the channel. I've made a little video that's going to come out on Christmas Eve. You've watched it already, but we've grown, nearly 5 times, really, this whole year?
Yeah, it's been really surprising and really appreciated by everybody around the world in YouTube.
Oh, I would think so. I think most of you, I think Mr. Beast has seen it. He's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. This is fucking insane. But no, we do appreciate your guys' support throughout the whole year. We've gone from, it would have been under 400 subscribers by the start of the year. Yeah. And I think the video essay effort from me is really giving that push, I would appreciate. I do, but at the end of the day, the fact that you guys have enjoyed it, I'm assuming a couple of you would have sent it to your mates, and that would have grown the channel a little bit more, and the other content that we've done. So we're super excited for what's going to come next year as well. But other than that, we're pretty much rounding up for the year now. We'll do this podcast, a couple more videos to come out throughout the year, but we thought at this point. There's only going to be the one episode we would have for the rest of the year would be on Christmas Day, and I mean, I feel like we could put the tools down for the day. I feel like we could enjoy the day. Not that we would do it on Christmas Day, but it would come out on Christmas Day, so I think we could skip that week. We've got a video coming out that week anyway about some channel stuff. So I thought it'd be best just to finish it this episode. This will be the one for the end of the year, and then next year it won't be long before we're 100 episodes. We're at 93 now.
93, 7 more weeks. We'll probably get into
early pre-season. February.
Yeah.
So I have to do something for that. But we'll probably do something for that. Probably get some more stuff. I am determined to get a new mic for the podcast, so we have one, so I don't have to fucking hold it. The most poorest podcast in the fucking planet. But
by 5,000 subscribers, we'll have a new mic.
Yeah, guys. So really, it's all your fault, is what Jack's saying. He's gaslighting you into fucking subscribing. But let's move into a bit of footy news. So a couple of things have gone on throughout the week, I guess. Probably the big one, especially for Bulldogs fans, is the fact that Darcy has signed a 4-year deal. So he's going to go to the end of 2029, which I think gets him to free agency. So good move from him, good little money move from him. But I'm not too surprised. I didn't think he'd go anywhere.
No.
2029 sounds like a few more years, but he'll get him to free agency, and then I think that's going to be the norm now as a young player. They're going to get you to free agency, and then they'll see where they're going to go from there.
Where you want to go, if you want to.
Where you want to play the rest of your career, and if the money's really worth it. Because if you get to free agency and you've kind of tapered off in your career, then might as well just ship them off. But we're expecting. I would be expecting that by then Darcy could be one of the best players in the game. At least one of the tall players.
Best key
position
tall.
player, I'm thinking he's probably going to play more forward than anything, maybe ruck, but...
because you think Tim English isn't... It depends on where he's going to play his football, really.
He re-signed with the Bulldogs. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. Yeah. I think he is a capable enough forward, and it's a pinch-hitting ruck. I think he'd definitely be one of those... I think he can be one of those few players that can play both the roles. It's interesting how the Bulldogs will line up, in the coming years, because all 3 of the key forwards are signed for long-term contracts, and I don't see any of them moving. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Bulldogs do in the next year or two. We'll get a little bit into that a little bit later with the coaches under pressure. But I think it's a really interesting year coming up for the Bulldogs. But I feel like they haven't really done much at all. Yes, they made the grand final in 2021, which was a great run for them. But it just, Luke Beveridge has never made top 4. So you kind of feel like that with the... I mean, you can say the list is one of the best in the comp. That's fair. I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I think that there's some holes in their list, but the fact that they've got 3 key forwards on such good money, you would think at one point that you could let one of them go and then use that money to plug up some holes that they actually need filled.
Yeah.
I would think that anyway. I mean, you think that... It's hard to say which one you'd get rid of. I mean, I would probably pick Aaron Norton because I think Ugelhagen and Darcy would be the 2 that I would grow from. And I think Norton can play both ends of the ground, which would probably be a lot more appealing for other clubs. But, yeah, I'm surprised the Bulldogs haven't tried to play Norton down back a little bit more to try and see it, because I think that that's a hole in their team, is the fact that Liam Jones carries that defence so much. So to chuck him back there. I mean, Roy Lobb kind of went back there late in the year. But that's also another thing. He was their 4th person that was going to be that tall forward that just couldn't get a game. So, interesting to see how the Bulldogs play. But good news for the Bulldogs, the fact that they did lock down Darcy pretty early, because he was one of the one of the players unsigned going into 2025. So now they can focus a lot of their effort on Marcus Bontempelli. So another one I want to talk about here is a couple of Blues injuries. So early pre-season, obviously the injury talk is a little bit scarce, but I think it will be coming up pretty shortly. Carlton do have a couple of injury concerns, and one of the big ones is Alex Chincotta. He won't be available for the opening rounds as he faces months on the sidelines with a hip issue. So, bit of a concern, not a huge player for them, but you know, he started last year. He had a good period of the season where he was playing as a tagger. So I don't know if he's going to play that role next year.
Yeah. It was they found a role for him for a couple of weeks, and then teams really started to figure it out, and he couldn't really. The game style didn't really change for him, and he couldn't really find a way to get back impact a game after that.
So I mean, he'd be out for it says here 5 months. So from now, that'd probably take him to April. Yeah. That's probably early. First third of the season, he's going to miss a lot of that. So another one here is Charlie Curnow. He's going to miss the team's Sunshine Coast preseason camp. Oh, God, I wouldn't be going to the Sunshine Coast for a preseason camp. He will be remaining in Melbourne for knee surgery.
I think he's just faking it. He just doesn't want to go there.
Yeah, he just doesn't want to go. He doesn't want to go there. He knows all the history.
He already knows how good he is. He doesn't need to go and just temper.
He doesn't need to
fate and just like.
Maybe Michael Voss is like, we know what happened. Just obviously it's not the same people running it, so it's just a pre-season camp. It's just a bit funny anyway. Curnow's had a lengthy history with knee issues, with a whopping 7 injuries in his right knee in the space of 4 years. I didn't even know that. Famously dislocated that knee playing basketball. As a result, missed all of 2020 season. Club remains confident going under the knife is Curnow's best option for 2025 as a part of the small cleanup. So it's interesting because he missed the end of last season with injuries. You would have thought they would have had it. I would have thought they would have had it pretty well sorted by now.
Yeah, you think they would have done it by now and realised that maybe they get him right straight away for pre-season, but...
I mean, even if it wasn't just for pre-season, but at least after Christmas, I don't know what's really been going on. And their injuries are a real issue going into, the end of last year. So, I mean, what does it say here? The Blues were decimated by injuries, had just 28 fit players to choose from in a 26-man squad. That was late in the year. I think it was against West Coast was that issue, and they still won that game. So, I mean, I think that they just have to be a little bit of an issue here if it's the injuries are starting to pile up. I mean, it's only two, but one's a big one, and Alex Chincotta is a pretty decent role player, which Carlton do kind of lack. So I think that's a couple of concerns early pre-season. Obviously, they're going to go to Christmas now. Probably a couple of injuries. Interesting to see if there's any AFL injuries from the Christmas period, like if someone just accidentally.
It wasn't Mills last year. No,
that was it. What was that from? That was from the
Mad
Monday.
Sorry.
But there are injuries that happen in those periods. So we'll see what happens. I'm thinking, I'll bank one.
I think there's always one that always happens over those 2 weeks.
I think there'd be a lot more, but it's a lot of the players like no one gives a fuck about. So it's like they just sneak it under the radar. But I mean, if a Charlie Curnow does it, then there's like headlines. Yeah, obviously. All right. Another thing I want to take a look at here is a couple of news stories. Early verdicts about draftees who are most likely going to be debuting early in the season for different clubs. The Adelaide Crows, obviously a pretty easy one here, is Sid Draper. So far he's like blitzing pre-season for the Crows since being drafted. Couple of good highlights so far. He would love to play round 1. I think AFL fantasy wise, a lot of people would be wanting to play round 1 as well. That is another thing as well. When AFL fantasy does release, there'll be another video we do. I'm thinking that's actually going to drop just after New Year's.
They normally drop just after Christmas.
Yeah,
in that week.
I think that I've seen a podcast coming out soon from the AFL fantasy traders guys. I think I saw that on one of their socials. So I think if that comes out pretty shortly after they will release, they will open AFL fantasy. But Sid Draper, I think, is definitely one to look at. I think he's going to get. Looks like he's training in the midfield with the Crows. So I don't know if he's going to get much of that role.
I don't think he'll get much of that role. I think
he's much of a runner or a wingman. I think the Crows kind of lack a sort of wingman role. I mean, we think about obviously, it's been a few years now, but Paul Seedsman was that role for the Crows for a very long time.
Yeah, and they had to play Brodie Smith up there for a couple of years before.
He's obviously aged out a bit
now.
Yeah,
he's aged out.
They probably chuck a bit like Rankin on the wing every now and then with Rochelle, maybe as an option, but they obviously like that little bit of injection of pace through the guts. I think that Sid Draper could fill that role as a wingman. Because I think the wing role is such an unheralded position that it is so important now. Like we saw the likes of D'Ambrosio, Jeremy Sharp, and Errol Goulden throughout the year, how important they were for their certain clubs. So I think the Crows could definitely use a player like a Sid Draper, get him involved, get him, early games into him, but we'll have to wait and see. Because the Crows, I think we mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, don't tend to play their young players early. But I think Sid Draper could be an outlier.
Yeah,
I think he could definitely be early.
For it.
Yeah. Next one, of course, is Brisbane, Levi Ashcroft. If he's not playing round 1, it's going to be an injury, surely.
Yeah, probably. They might. Yeah, it would be interesting what happens with him. But they might think that let's give him a couple of weeks and see what he's like in the VFL, not chuck him straight into the AFL system. But you never know.
I think that he's going to go straight in. After a couple of pre-season games, I think he's good to go. They're saying he's better than his brother, so I think he'd be pretty close. Players like Sam Marshall could be on the mark pretty close. He was best on ground in this year's Talents League grand final, so he could definitely be an option, Sam Marshall. I think he'll be a little bit later. I think he's definitely a player in development. Yeah. Carlton, Jagger Smith obviously was their number 1 pick. Pick 3 in the end. Had some good VFL performances for Richmond late in the season. And could have an early impact for the AFL side. Seems like a bit of a runner. Has some good contested numbers as well. 18 contested from a game in his VFL debut against Williamstown. Racked up 31 touches, 18 contested, 8 clearances. Don't know if he's going to get much of a role inside for Carlton, though. It's probably pretty tough.
With Walsh, Cripps, Chera.
Yeah, I think the Crows, the Blues... I think the Blues are definitely going to try and chuck more numbers through there this year to try and relieve a little bit of impact on Patrick Cripps.
Yeah, the thing is that he'll probably play off half forward. So
I think that's where he's
not that unforgotten player, which at a pick 3 you wouldn't expect the Carlton to do that. They'd want to chuck him, get him involved early.
Well, it says here as well that he had in that grand final, he had 8 intercepts, so maybe a half-back role as well could be an option, and that would definitely get his numbers up. So could be an option there for the Blues. Collingwood, going to be a bit hard to say. Their first didn't make their first selection into the draft until pick 47. I wouldn't really expect much there. They got Joel Cochran, Charlie West, and Will Hayes. I don't really think anyone's going to be debuting early for the Pies. I think very much they're going to be playing, anyone, the best experienced lineup.
They wouldn't go to their draftees. They've got other players that have played over the last couple of years. Yeah, I think they'll probably give first dibs too.
Yeah, I think as well with players like Dan Houston, Tim Membry, players like that coming in, they're going to be pretty hard for young players to get spots so far. And also did been a couple of good signings in the last couple of weeks. The Pies, Dematia got re-signed as well, and I think it was Lockie Sullivan also got re-signed for a couple of years maybe. So they're definitely looking for, I think like you said, they're going to get, those players are probably going to get rewarded with games early if they do pick young players. Essendon, Isaac Kako, looks like every chance of slotting into their best 23 early. I think
if he's not in round 0.
Yeah, they play against Gold Coast.
Yeah,
so.
If he's not there, well, he really would have to be injured.
Yeah, I think that they need that small forward burst.
Yeah, they've been wanting that for years.
Yeah, so I think he's definitely going to get a good opportunity first. He's probably going to take over. Jake Stringer left, obviously, so that could definitely slot straight in there. Nate Caddy, Obviously, he came in last year, but he seems like he's had a pretty decent pre-season. He's ready to go. So I think those two are definitely going to light it up for Essendon, hopefully. I mean, fucking who knows with Essendon at the moment. Murphy Reid slipped through to their first pick for Fremantle. He was a pretty high pick, and he was, I think he was one of the players in the draft who said like he was, people kind of forgot about him almost in the draft. He slipped through to pick 16, I think it was.
It seemed like he didn't.
He wanted to show that
he didn't want to go to Freo. People thought that, but then he came out and said, "Like,
I'm going to prove people wrong."
Yeah.
So he is a Victorian, but I think he slipped through the cracks. A lot of people have said, so he definitely could get an early role. And Fremantle, they have a pretty good list. Obviously, people are expecting them to be a real jumper this year, but maybe a Murphy Reid could slide into that team somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe early on, we'll have to wait and see. The Cats, this is obviously going to be a bit of a tough one. A lot of their trade, they trade away a lot of their picks, so might as well just skip through them. The Gold Coast, obviously Leo Lombard is the big talking point. He may, I think, maybe get a couple of games in the VFL, but there is huge raps around him. Yeah, well, and he's already had a good start to the pre-season too, I've heard.
Yeah, it's like with last year with Jake Rogers and some of their players.
Jed Walter.
Yeah.
And
they didn't start. Well, obviously Jed Walter started with an injury pre-season. So and Jake Rogers, he just didn't seem like he was at the level just yet.
Yeah, but players like Will Graham definitely got early, got some games, and Sam Clousey, he was a little bit different, but he was definitely an option too. So he could get games, and the Gold Coast definitely I think will rotate some young players through this year.
Yeah.
But I think Leo Lombard, he could be every chance, and he's a pretty decent size for a kid, so I think he's probably their best option. Harry Oliver looms as the best opening round chance for GWS. He's a composed defender, renowned for his competitiveness, decision-making, and pinpoint distribution with the footy. So maybe, it'd have to be an injury, I feel like, if there's going to be a player like him playing in round one, or opening round. So maybe an option there. Hawthorn had Noah Miraz and Cody Anderson. Probably don't expect them to be playing for Hawthorn so far early on. Melbourne is an interesting one. Potential of all three of their draftees being in the round one mix. Top pick was Harvey Langford. I think he actually could be a chance.
I think he would. I think he would get a good chance.
I think that they may give options to Volstrup and that sort of. I think he will definitely get first dibs, obviously in those positions. But I think Melbourne are kind of realizing as well that Petrarca, Oliver, the baton is starting to be handed over, and they do need to start rotating potentially Petrarca forward. Yeah. So maybe they could give a couple of younger kids a go, and maybe Trent Rivers going through there. I think that he's probably their best bet, and obviously Xavier Lindsay was another first-round draftee. He's can play in multiple positions, good kicking skills, and I think that's definitely another option as well. I think Melbourne definitely could be playing some younger kids early. Yeah. See how we go. North Melbourne, Finn O'Sullivan, I'm pretty sure he'll be playing very early on. Obviously, the pick 2 for North Melbourne. Matt Whitlock, obviously, adds some size and frame, maybe getting some senior games. Interesting that they picked him up. They could have let him slide through to round 2, but they threw away their future first-round pick for this guy. So, they obviously picked up some decent experienced players in the trade period, North Melbourne. So I don't know if Matt Whitlock's going to get a lot of games early, but yeah, I think he's another option. I think Jack Darling, Nick Delarkey probably take those spots pretty early up, and then we'll see if he gets a game maybe later on. Port Adelaide got their man in Joe Berry. Obviously, a lot of talk. We've actually talked about him quite a bit. Looks like a small forward. I think he could get a go.
I really think that if they're going to get that, he's going to get a go for round 1. Yeah,
I think that Port Adelaide definitely. Gonna have to, they're not really prone to picking young kids early. It's been a while. When they had that dream draft of Dersma, Rosie, and Butters, obviously they played pretty early. But since really that point, they really don't try to use top draftees straight away. But I think a small forward, Berry, for round 1, helping out Willie Rioli, hopefully add some potency up forward. That would be helpful for the Port Adelaide. Richmond, anyone they'll fill in there.
The pick in the top 25 picks, all of them probably going to go.
Yeah, it looks like Josh Smiley's the best bet because he's had a great pre-season and he hasn't had any injury concerns. Sam Lalore, coming off a high-grade hamstring injury suffered in September, so they're going to take the cautious approach with him, which may mean he may miss round 1 if they go all the way through, but if he's ready to go, he'll be in. They've obviously got players like Jonty Foll, Luke Traynor, Harry Armstrong, Tom Sims, as well. So there's a whole bunch of options. I think Richmond's team from 2 years ago to now, to round 1 of 2025 is going to be astronomically different.
Yeah.
St Kilda, Toby Travalia, I think he's definitely a big option here. I think he's definitely going to be a big chance because he's that halfback, rebounding defender, great runner. I think St Kilda are going to love that. They do need some extra pace and that sort of... I think also as well that Liam Henry's also had some injury issues throughout the preseason, so he may miss, and I think Travalia will fill that up. Alex Toro, obviously he does have a delayed start to 2025 with a back injury, but he is a key defender, and I think that could be used early if he's all fit. You got Dougal Howard, Cal Wilkie. I think he could definitely slot in back there at one point if they needed. Sydney, I kind of doubt anyone really. They do say that they're pretty optimistic on Jesse Totoli. Could make an immediate impact as a midfield forward. I personally think that if Sydney are going to play younger guys early, it'll be players like Angus Sheldrick, who didn't play much last year, or didn't play at all last year. Our man, Caden Cleary, I think we mention him every week. I think those guys are going to be mentioned more. Obviously, players like Ned Bowman and Riak Andrew. I would love to see Riak Andrew play some games. Obviously, he's the brother of Mac Andrew. Yeah. So, love to see him have a go. We've had some Sudanese players in the past, like Alir. He played really well, and I'm pretty disappointed that we let him go so quickly. I thought he was a lot older than he was, but we just let him go, and now he's fucking had an All-Australian year. Hasn't won a premiership, though. Hasn't made a grand final, so he is missing out on a couple of good things. West Coast...
Yeah, losing them.
Yeah, well, at least we're making them. West Coast, left forward hybrid, Bo Allen and Hamish Davis. Played Waffle League throughout the year, so I think Bo Allen's biggest chance.
I think we'll get a shot. Round one.
Yeah, I think he's the best bet. And finally, with the Western Bulldogs, Sam Davidson, the VFL's most promising young talent from this year, is tried against hardened bodies. Physically, might be ready-made for the Dogs. Could be an option. Cooper Hines was their top draftee, so could be a good chance to appear for the Bulldogs. I don't really know. I think they're 50-50 on if the Bulldogs will use some kids.
It's a bit difficult with the Bulldogs. Like, you've looked at previous draftees. Sometimes it depends on where they're picked in the draft. Like Riley Sanders picked high, but he got a few games early. But then near the end of this, then
mid-season he got sent back to the VFL.
And then like same with the Ugle Hagen, he started a few games, and then they dropped him to the VFL
to get him some experience. And I mean, sometimes it seems like it actually works. I think it is a lot of the top clubs like the Geelongs, the Sydneys, even Hawthorn back in the day would give you almost a pseudo apprenticeship as a VFL player for a year or two, or at least for a certain part of the year. So I think it's definitely not the bad option, but I think there's definitely some younger players coming through that we'll be seeing early in the season. But let's move to the most under pressure coaches for 2025. So with people like John Longmire leaving the Sydney Swans, obviously a lot of coaches are under pressure now, thinking of who is going to be under the pressure cooker going into 2025. Now, on 9, the Footy on 9 have said the 8 coaches most under pressure are Matthew Nicks, Justin Longmuir, Ken Hinkley, Michael Voss, Simon Goodwin, Alistair Clarkson, Brad Scott, and Luke Beveridge. Dwayne Russell on SEN has said that Matthew Nicks is the most under pressure, followed by Justin Longmuir, Luke Beveridge, Ken Hinkley, Michael Voss, Simon Goodwin, and Brad Scott as his 7. Now I'm going to list my most under pressure coaches. I've gone with 9 here, and then you can read yours and then we'll kind of discuss. So my most under pressure coach going into next year is Ken Hinkley, followed by Matthew Nicks at 2, Justin Longmuir at 3, Simon Goodwin at 4, Luke Beveridge at 5, Michael Voss at 6, Alistair Clarkson at 7, Brad Scott at 8, and Damien Hardwick at 9th. So what have you got there?
It's about the same list. I've started, number 1 I think is Ken Hinkley. 2 is Simon Goodwin. 3 is Justin Longmuir. 4 is Matthew Nicks. 5 is Luke Beveridge. 6 is Michael Voss. 7 is Damien Hardwick. 8 is Alistair Clarkson. And 9 is Craig McRae.
So we've only got one different. I've said Brad Scott and then 9, and you've said Craig McRae. So I guess we'll start with them one. So Craig McRae obviously had a pretty tough year last year, injury ravaged. Everyone's expecting them to rise. Is that kind of what you're looking at?
And they're going for the now. So if they don't get it, like we've been saying since the trade period, that if they don't get it right and the wheels fall off, they've kind of costed themselves.
They're going to be. It's going to be a steep decline for Collingwood if they don't, at least get to grand final at this point. I mean, everyone's expecting them to be. I'm thinking top 2. So I think that he is under pressure. I kind of lean on the side of that he still got them a premiership only a year ago or 2 years ago. So I think he's not as under pressure as people like Brad Scott, for example. I think that Brad Scott, the fact that he was supposed to be there when he first got the job, everyone was thinking that they're going to go back to finals, the Bombers, and potentially finally break their drought. That obviously hasn't occurred. And now they're expecting that they're going to fall under again. And he's going to have to rebuild it.
That's why I've put him as not really under pressure as much as someone like that, because the fact is that they've went to the draft a bit more this year. They've lost a few experienced players, so that in hindsight, the board and all that Essendon should realise that they're not going to
I don't think he's under pressure on terms of his job, but I do think that the fans will be extremely frustrated and angry if they get to round 10 and they've won 2 or 3 games. I think that's where the pressure's going to come from. And, I think Brad Scott, to be honest, like when he went to North Melbourne, when he was there that whole time, he never got them to a grand final. Yeah. So, Essendon, he's won a couple of finals in his coaching career, but I think question marks will be made of Brad Scott midway through 2025 if he doesn't get off to a decent start. Yeah. At least have an even ledger by their second bye. Fucking second bye, whatever. Damien Hardwick may be an interesting one because they weren't mentioned in either of the lists that were mentioned by pseudo experts, whatever. But Damien Hardwick, I think, is under a lot of pressure. I think that yes, he's at the Gold Coast. His first year, he's getting everything set up. But I think at this point, when are the Gold Coast going to make the finals? Yeah. We should not... And, I don't have him in the 8 next year. You don't have him in the 8. So, he's supposed to be getting them to... he said that 80% of his side that was there is going to win a flag.
That's why I think he's under pressure. He thinks he's pretty much got the list. He only just needs to plug a few holes. And he's been there a year and a bit now. So he's been there for a full pre-season. He's going to be there for a full pre-season now. Yeah. He's going to have the game style. So if he doesn't be able to turn this around and make the finals, the pressure is going to come to him.
I think the problem is as well with Damien Hardwick is the fact that there is so much pressure on him because it's not only his legacy, I guess, of getting teams to finals and premierships, but what happens if 12 months down the track they haven't made finals? This guy was supposed to basically save the Gold Coast Suns. Yeah. If they don't make finals in the next year or two, does it get to the point? I know this is a big call, but what do they do with the Gold Coast if Damien Hardwick can't do it? Yeah. Do they just get rid of them? Do they leave them in the AFL for, an 18th club that just never make it?
Well, the thing is that in 2 years, it'll be 2027, 28. That's when Tassie's about to come in and all the concessions and all that start to go to them. Yeah. What happens to the Gold Coast then? That's the thing.
I think that's why Damien Hardwick is under pressure. I put him at 9th because I still think that he's not under pressure of job or anything like that, but I think that there will be people around the footy public who will be like, what is happening with the Suns if it gets to that mid-season period and he hasn't done anything? I think Alistair Clarkson and Michael Voss are pretty self-explanatory. Luke Beveridge, he had it pretty high up there. Simon Goodwin may be an interesting one. So, a lot of people aren't expecting much from Melbourne next year. I think it's pretty safe to say. But I think the point of they've had so much go on in the last 12 months off the field. Something's got to give.
That's why I think he's the second most under pressure coach.
So you put him at 2nd. I've put him at 4th, and my reasoning is 4th is because I think the other 3 are the fact that they have to make finals. Yeah. I don't think Simon Goodwin has to make finals to keep his job, but I think he's under pressure on the fact that if they don't show some improvement somewhere, we saw throughout the year the fans just stop going to their games. Yeah. So if they're not bringing in money and revenue through supporters, they start performing poorly, there will be pressure on him because now they've got a pseudo fan base of we are somewhat successful, and we're only going to come if you're successful. So if you play like dog shit, we're not going to come. And if you play in front of the MCG, 100,000 crowd capacity, and you've got 20,000 people there, it's pretty freaking sad.
Yeah.
So I think there will be some pressure on that point. The only reason why I've got the other three in front is because of finals, and we'll get to them in a minute. So you've got him in second. Is there a reason, more on to the point, or?
Well, not really, no. I would say it's about the same thing, but I think that the players like Matthew Nicks and Justin Longmuir, we'll say about Matthew Nicks first. The fact is that he hasn't got them to finals yet. That if they got close in the last 2 years. He nearly got them there, and if the Swans won 2 years ago, went their way, they would have made the finals. Yeah. So he's making he's going up.
But on the point of it though, if I look at it this way, if I put 3-2-1 in the most pressured coaches to potentially lose their jobs at the end of the year, if they don't beat their pass mark or whatever. So Ken Hinkley, the reason why I've got him at number 1, Ken Hinkley, is because he has to win a grand final.
Yeah, he has to
keep his job.
Yeah, he has
to.
So
that's obviously the most pressure you could be under. So that's why I put him at 1. Matthew Nicks at number 2 is because I think they have to make finals, almost win one. And the reason why Justin Longmuir is just behind Matthew Nicks, millimetres behind, is because I think that Justin Longmuir could survive not making finals because they've got the list.
The thing is that with Justin Longmuir is the fact that he has got them to finals and won a final.
Yeah, and that's also another thing. The thing is a little bit lower.
And the fact is also that with Matthew Nicks is that, he hasn't got them there, but the board has given him 6 years to get up there. They can see the potential of the list that the Crows have. That if he gets to finals, they could do a lot of damage, like they did 2 years ago when they were nearly there.
Yeah, so you've got Matthew Nicks at 4, I've got him at 2. That's basically our sort of.
And that's why. And the thing is that since that grand final for Melbourne, they've went downhill.
Yeah,
they've went downhill, and now the public eye is on them because there was so much scrutiny at the end of last year.
Throughout the whole year.
Yeah, and then it started, and it just kept on rolling through the entire year. That's why I think it's started with the alleged drug scandal of Simon Goodwin.
Yeah.
Then Joel Smith, then Clayton Oliver, and then Petrarca, and it just keeps on rolling on and on and on and on.
And then all these trade rumours coming through of different things. That went all the way through October, really.
Yeah.
So I think, I kind of see it. But at the end of the day, I think the 3 most under pressure coaches are Hinkley, Nicks, and Longmuir. And I think those 3 could potentially be. We could get to the end of the season and all 3 of them have lost their job. I think we could see that. I can see a world where Simon Goodwin gets sacked. I can. But I feel like even if they have a poor year on the ladder, I think that he can still have his job. I think that results aren't as big a pressure on him. I think it's morale, basically.
It's the public eye.
The public eye, the morale, the keeping the bloody names out of headlines. But I can definitely see a world where Simon Goodwin is, under so much pressure going into mid-year. I think mid-year is going to be an interesting one to look at. Maybe even go back and look at these and maybe see what happens. I think if I could pick one coach now that's going to be sacked at the end of the year other than Ken Hinkley, and I'm sorry to Ken, but it's about the fact that he has to win a grand final.
It's the fact that there's so much pressure on him that every single fan...
It almost feels like he's out the door at the moment.
Yeah, anyway. I think it was... He literally Port wrote his resignation after that trade period. To get rid of Dan Houston for such a little price, they're putting a lot of pressure on Ken Hinkley to get them to where they want.
Yeah, I think that Josh Carr's and he's in the wings waiting.
Yeah.
If I had to pick another coach that I've got inklings that's going to be sacked, I think it's going to be Matthew Nicks because I've got the Crows in the 8, but I don't know. I think they could be very close. I think it could be very close. I have more faith in Freo at this stage. That's just me. I think it's going to be very interesting, guys. Make sure to let us know down below on the coaching front who you think is most under pressure going into 2025. both of us have said Ken Hinkley, basically. I think a lot of people would say the same.
Yeah.
I'm very surprised that Dwayne Russell actually didn't say Ken Hinkley and put him down at 4th. I don't know why that is, unless he's thinking like there's no pressure on him because he already knows he's lost his job. But yeah, anyway. But finally, guys, I wanted to talk about the best and most memorable games of 2024. So the AFL put out a post and said that the Port Adelaide Hawthorn game was the most memorable game of the season. Is that right?
Yeah, the semi-final.
The semi-final. So I thought we'd go over the 10 games that I thought were most memorable and the best of the season. So in 10th spot, I have gone with the Port Adelaide v Hawthorn game in round 10, where Darcy Byrne-Jones kicked the winner after Port Adelaide made a massive comeback in the last quarter to basically steal it. That's my 10th most memorable. 9th is Collingwood v Hawthorn in Gather Round. A lot of you may not actually have this on the list, but the fact that we were there was the reason why this has made the list. The Collingwood blitz at the start of the game, I thought it was done. Hawthorn clawed their way back throughout the night. The atmosphere was insane. Jack Ginnivan had some moments. Blake Hardwick moving forward was amazing. They nearly stole it in the last quarter, but Collingwood held on. I remember so many great moments from that game. That's made 9th spot for me. 8th is Fremantle v Carlton in Gather Round. So the reason why this one was memorable and one of the better games was I think that this is a very contested game of footy. I think that Carlton were always staying close to the Fremantle throughout the afternoon, but just couldn't get in front. And then obviously the controversial ending to that game with the umpiring dissent crap that, made it more memorable for me. But I still think it was a great game, and I think it just pips out the other one that I mentioned, Collingwood v Hawthorn. After that is in 7th, Collingwood v Carlton, the game that had Mitch McGovern miss the goal after the siren.
Wasn't that was Pendlebury's 400th, wasn't it?
That was Pendlebury's 400th as well. So that's made 7th spot for me. 6th spot is St Kilda v Carlton in round 24. I think that was an amazing game. Yeah. Jack Higgins kicking the goal of the siren. They thought they kicked Carlton out of a final spot before Fremantle choked and didn't give it. But what a game that one was. Looked like St Kilda had a game for a lot of it, but in the last quarter it kind of felt like Carlton had a stronghold on the game. But then Jack Higgins kicked the winner. I think that was a great game. I think that was I think that was the best, the second best game throughout the season, throughout the minor rounds. The best game of the minor rounds I think was Anzac Day. Essendon v Collingwood, a draw. Essendon, it was a goal for a lot of the game. Essendon had some moments to win it. Collingwood had some moments to win it as well. It was one of the all-time great Anzac Day games. So that's why it's made 5th spot on my list. But now we get to finals. The first final and then 4th spot for the year, the Giants v Brisbane game. The Giants had this game pretty much locked up in the third quarter. But Brisbane clawed their way back, and if you think about it, without this game from Brisbane, they don't win the premiership. Yeah. Who knows who wins from that point. But the fact that they were able to claw their way back into that game and steal it at the death. Joe Danaher's final quarter. Lachie Neale had a massive game. Remember, one of the better games of the year, I thought. And I think it was a great final series overall. I think it was so many. I mean, I've got 4 games here from the final series that, I ever find it some of the best of the year. And a lot of the time, final series can be pretty crap after maybe 1 or 2 games. Yeah. Third position was the Swans versus the Giants in the qualifying final. Obviously, the Giants had the game won for a lot of this game, but in the last quarter, the Swans just were able to just flex their muscles. Chad Warner had a massive last quarter, and of course, Isaac Heaney. Heroic Heaney obviously was called that. What a game he had. That final goal, second last goal from Isaac Heaney from outside 50, pushed past the tackler, kicked a goal. Was a massive goal, and then Joel Amati, who had hardly touched it all game, kicked the winner. So that was my 3rd spot. In 2nd spot, and I've gone with something different to the AFL. I have gone Port Adelaide v Hawthorn in the semi-final as the 2nd spot. The semi-final, obviously, the game was really good. Port Adelaide led throughout the whole night. Hawthorn nearly stole it at the end through James Sicily, who hit the post. That was so close to drifting inside the right goalpost, I believe. Port Adelaide were able to hold on against all odds. No one thought Port Adelaide were going to win this game. And they were able to hold on and win it. It was a great game of footy. I think it was... And then obviously the theatrics after the game with Ken Hinkley. I was a little bit iffy on it at first, and I don't think coaches should really be doing that. But I think to the theatre of the game, I like it. And I think the AFL should revoke their $20,000 final Ken Hinkley too, because they're using that as marketing for the fucking Gather Round. Yeah. So fucking assholes. Anyway. Give my boy Ken back his 20k. Anyway, finally, the best and most memorable game of 2024. the Geelong v Brisbane prelim final, my favourite game of the year. I think we were watching this on the stream. I was sitting there absolutely flabbergasted. I remember
I was shocked.
I forgot to change the scoreboard on the stream.
Yeah.
I remember going back and looking, and I was like, "Oh shit, I forgot to change it." I was just so encapsulated by this game. The Cats had a good lead in the second term. I think it was about 26 points. The Lions clawed their way back. Then the Cats kicked away in the third term to almost have this game won. It was a very tight fourth quarter, and then Geelong almost stole it. It looked like they had the game won when Ollie Henry kicked the goal. But then the Brisbane Lions again just fought back, kicked the last few, got 3 goals of the game, I believe, and were able to win the game, go to the grand final, inevitably win the premiership.
It was one of the most entertaining last 5 minutes of a prelim final. Just absolutely, it just shocked me how different the entire game was to the last 5 minutes. That everyone just threw their punches. Yeah, like it was the last time that either team was going to play their last game of the season.
Yeah, it was like they knew, it was how a prelim final, you would think would be most times. Like both teams know that if we don't win this, our season is over.
And there's no tomorrow.
There's no tomorrow, and that's how they both played it. And it was really unfortunate that someone had to lose that game because I think both of them were brilliant. That's why that's made my favourite spot. Is there any games that you can think of that we put on the list?
Most memorable, I thought, was the 100.
I thought that would be. I don't think it was the best game though.
But it was a very memorable one.
Yeah, it was pretty memorable for me, sitting in the fucking Port Adelaide fans going, "Oh, you fucking suck, Sydney! You fucking losers! You don't deserve to be on top of the ladder, you fucking dogs!" And then, a couple of Port Adelaide fans' teeth fly out because they're fucking, the few that they had left anyway were just flying out onto the field. Anyway, was there any other games you can think of?
Not really.
I think that was pretty much all. I looked at a couple of other games. There were a couple of games that were close. Like Collingwood v Carlton earlier in the season was pretty close to that one as well. There were a couple of other ones that were close. The Fremantle v Collingwood draw. That was a pretty decent one as well.
One there.
Yeah, that was close. That was in my top. I think we had about 15, and then that got knocked out early.
That was an umpire's decision that changed the game on that one as well.
The reason why I picked Carlton was because I was there. That's why I thought it was, But anyway, that's pretty much all we have for this episode of the podcast, guys. The last episode of the year. Thank you so much for the support, specifically on the podcast. This is what we're going to thank the podcast listeners. Thank you for your support. We love doing this every single week. Basically, I think I say it in the video coming up, but basically we've monetized us talking about footy for 40 minutes. So the fact that we've been able to do that, that's a dream of mine.
Pretty impressive, really.
I mean, it's not a lot of money, but it's enough. If you want to support us, though, become a channel member, we'll get some more money for it. But thank you so much for the support throughout the year, guys. Have a good Christmas. Have a happy new year. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow and leave us 5 stars on Spotify. That's all from me. Any last words?
Enjoy holidays, guys. It's been a privilege to give my view of football for 2024.
Oh, it's been a privilege, I would say so. And we'll be back January 1, 2025. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you all in the new year.
See you later, guys.